Oh,
Hello, Mr. Watkins.
yes.
This is Scott with Kenergy. I had a message to call you.
Yeah, I wanted to see about getting this smart meter removed and the original meter put back.
Okay. Well, we recycled the old meters, so we don't really have those any longer. Can I ask you why you want to
And,
remove it?
why is everybody else wanting to remove them? Because our bills have over doubled, these meters versus the old ones. And I'm not buying the whole PR crap that's been put out. I've never had electric bills this high.
Okay. It looks. Do you have more than one? It looks like maybe you have more than one account. Okay. Is this just your house that you're asking about?
Well, I want them replaced on the house and the shop. I have 2 meters.
Okay. And so the bill that you're mentioning, now what I want to do is I want to look at your account to see how high it is, and look at it in relation to say other years or whatever.
Okay.
Because it looks like you've had your meter maybe in September or something.
It was a year ago, September.
Yeah.
Year ago, last September.
You don't really have that much. It doesn't look like that's the whole time you've been in the house, right? Because it
Right.
doesn't look like you have any past usage.
No, it's a new construction.
Okay, so we really don't have much usage to go by to say, well, this is right or wrong or whatever. Other than April of last year, your bill was higher than that. But so it makes it difficult since there's no history to go back on to see.
I've been a Kenergy customer for nearly 20 years, and
Right.
I moved from 400 feet across the way to a new house here,
Right.
and my bill is terrible, and it all coincides with these new meters.
Well, sometimes things are coincidental, but aren't necessarily, um, don't necessarily have anything to do with one another. If I look at your usage during January, which I'm gonna guess is part of the reason that your bill's high. It looks like when the temperature outside is quite warm, your usage is quite low. But when the temperature is cold, your usage is high. So I would guess that maybe you have electric heat. Is that accurate statement?
I have electric heat, and our heat stays between 65 and 68. One week we were gone, the 23rd of February. That week of January, I'm sorry, the 23rd of January.
23rd of January.
We were gone that week. The heat was turned down to 55 degrees. There was nobody whatsoever in this house, and the energy
On
was.
the 23rd of January.
Yep.
Your usage was 28 kilowatt hours that day.
Okay, and then you look at Wednesday of that week, see how it jumps up.
I'm not sure what Wednesday was. Was Wednesday the next day, 24th?
28 should have been on a Monday, right?
28th.
23rd was Monday. 24th was Tuesday. 25th should have been Wednesday.
Okay, it's low that day.
Not according to that graph. It was up to like 150 kilowatt hours with nobody home.
On January?
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the 26th, it looks like it was high.
Okay, we came back. We left on Sunday afternoon that week.
Right.
We left on Sunday afternoon, turned the heat down to 55, and we were gone that entire week and didn't come back until late Friday afternoon. And we used.
Okay, so let me see here. So from Thursday the 26th to Friday the 27th, it looks like it jumps up.
Yeah, and there was nobody home until late Friday evening.
And then the next day it's a little higher, but it's also a little colder outside. And I don't know what you use your power on, because we don't have the ability to see that, but what I can see is that when it's cold, your usage is high. And so I would just guess that it has to do with your heating system. If you had a different type heating system that was, not electric, strictly electric, like like a high efficiency heat pump or something like that. And I'm just guessing that it's electric furnace. Is that the case, or is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, even though we sell electricity, we discourage folks from using an electric furnace, and the reason we do is for this reason right here. They have high bills, and even if you turn it down, it still runs. And now, granted, when you turn to 55, it's obviously not going to run as much as if you got it on, 75 or whatever. But it's still, when it's rather cold outside. It was 36 degrees on that day that we're talking about. It was 36. So even at 55, it's still going to be running.
Okay.
And the next day was 32. So that's from 36 degrees to 55 degrees is a reasonable difference. It's 20 degrees difference. So it's still going to be running, and that would cause you to have.
But I have a new home with insulation. It's insulated well.
Yes, sir. If you didn't, your bills would be like $800, like some of the you mentioned. Maybe I don't know. I talk to so many folks. Sometimes I lose track of who mentions what. But
yeah, and I appreciate that you have a job to do and you're trying to control the spin out that the company's going through. I appreciate all that, but this is not working. We need to do something different. My bill didn't just jump up automatically because it was cold. It was colder a few days of the month. It was warmer this year than it's ever been, and my bill has over doubled.
That's not true, sir. It was colder in December by an appreciable amount than it was the previous December, by a very measured amount. In fact, the degree days was about 850 degree days in the last December before last. It was 530 something. So from 530 degree days to 850 degree days is an appreciable difference. So it's very difficult to go back and look at month to month, and make any sort of determination by it. And the simple fact of the matter is you weren't in your house back then. So we don't know what your bills were back then.
I know I've never ever had a Kenergy bill this friggin' high. Never. Not even when I was in the house next door that wasn't nearly as well insulated. Had single pane windows in it.
Well, I guess at this point, there's nothing really that I can say to you that's going to help. I wish there was, but we do not have the old meters, and we're not going to dig them out of the trash. Basically, they've been recycled, so that they've not they're not usable any longer. They've been taken out of service. So.
Okay, and I'm worried about these radiation that these meters are supposed to be putting off that I've read about.
Well, those claims are baseless and not grounded in any sort of scientific data whatsoever. Those simply are not true. And I don't know. I suppose that me telling you that's not really going to help you either. But there's no scientific data whatsoever. These are just. It's kind of like I don't know what it's kind of like. It's like if I just make a blanket statement to you without any sort of basis in reality or proof, and so then how do you prove that it's false?
Well, there's history that supports that claim because Canada's pulling all those smart meters out now.
No, sir. There's absolutely no history to support the claim whatsoever. The frequency that these meters operate on, radio frequency. They do not transmit continuously, so that's a fact. You can go to the manufacturer's website and look that up if you'd like. The power output of the meters is 0.4 of a watt, so it's less than a half a watt. It is about the same power as a child's walkie-talkie, And so most folks don't have any qualms about their children playing with walkie-talkie. And so that is the radio frequency right next to your child's head. And so that doesn't bother most folks, but these, which aren't next to your head, they're behind a metal shield. So all the radio waves are actually transmitted away from your home and not into your home. So, they are in the 900 megahertz range, which is the same range as baby monitors. And so most folks, these days, and my kids are grown, but they had baby monitors back when my kids were young, and they didn't have any issues with them. They sit there and transmit continuously while your baby's asleep, and they're the same frequency. So these aren't some sort of things emitting radiation, as it's been suggested. There's no radioactive material in them. It's simply a mechanism to retrieve the readings.
What you're telling me is it's just tough shit. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm not going to say that. That's your words. But there is no option to opt out. So I will tell you that. But I'm not gonna say it's just tough. I mean that's a little bit harsh,
I mean, you've got over 80% of your customers complaining about high.
No, sir. That's not true. We've got there's a T90 segment of the population that are making baseless claims and getting folks like yourself upset about something that is it's actually not true. There's no radiation coming out of these. They're not harmful to folks. Your bill is a result of your usage. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else.
My usage has never ever been this high, though.
It hasn't been this high because you haven't been in the house. Well, there's a couple reasons dollar-wise why it's high. There's been a rate increase. A couple months ago there was a rate increase, and it really wasn't a rate increase. The rate increased 2 years ago, but there was an economic reserve, which in retrospect we probably shouldn't have used. We should have let the rate increase when Century Aluminum left the system, which that's what caused it. But out of and I won't say out of the goodness of our heart, because that sounds like we're all all we do is sit there and think of ways to help folks. But in a way, that's true. We use that economic reserve to stave off that rate increase as long as possible. And so, I guess in a way it is true. We do sit around and think about ways that we can reduce the rate and keep the rate as low as possible. And it's really not appreciated to the extent that we put a lot of effort into that. And so, what I would want to ask you is, what do we've got to benefit by charging somebody outrageous rates for electricity?
You doubled your income in 1 month's time.
No, we're not a for-profit company, sir. So
but you did.
We didn't double our income. When you look at the amount of electricity that was consumed, and we're billed for the electricity that is consumed by each member. And so, if the meters were incorrect, that would not add up to the amount of electricity that we consumed, and it was a peak month. There's a lot of electricity consumed, and it just so happens it corresponded with the artificial rate increase. Like I mentioned, the rate actually increased 2 years ago, but the credits ran out. So that is
credits ran out in October.
Exactly.
So why am I seeing it on my January bill?
Well, because in November you didn't use any electricity, in December you didn't use as much, and in January you did. December was a result of November's bill, and November wasn't cold. You didn't use that much in November.
So what's going to happen when it's 110 in the shade out here this summer? Am I going to have another $400 bill?
I would look back at your summertime bills in August. August and September, you really didn't use that much. Your August bill was 1,600 kilowatt hours, 1,660, and your September bill was 2,341. So your October, which is a result of your September bill, was $23.17. Your usage wasn't that high back then, and I don't know when you moved in there, into the house, but your summertime bills are not that bad. So I would suggest that like you mentioned, your house is insulated fairly well, and you probably have a fairly efficient air conditioner. Your heater's not efficient. And if you had a more efficient heater, then those those really bad wintertime bills probably wouldn't be so bad.
I have a hard time believing a furnace that's a year old is not as efficient, when I've got a good air
Well,
conditioner that's a year old too.
If it's an electric furnace, there is no efficient electric furnace. Time doesn't really matter. The first one made, back in 1890 or whatever, 1880, it's just as efficient as a modern one. There's really no such thing as an efficient electric furnace.
Okay, so you're telling me I'm sitting here in socks in my own house and my toes are freezing because I have to keep my heat between 65 and 67, 68, and it's because I have an inefficient furnace.
If your furnace, and say, I have to work off what you've told me, and I'm assuming that what you told me is correct, and there's no reason for you not to tell me, the correct. If you have an electric furnace, there is no efficient electric furnace. That's what I'm telling you. They're all expensive to operate, and we discourage folks from using them for this exact reason.
Okay, so
it makes people's bills high, and they get unhappy, and so then it's untenable. There's no way to fix the situation. If you have an electric furnace, your bills are high.
okay, so my boss that lives a mile up the road from me has got an outside wood burner, and his bill went up $160. You telling me he's got an inefficient furnace too?
Well, I can't look at his bill, and I can't talk to you about it because we're not permitted to.
I understand that, but you're not making sense. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make sense.
If I were able to look at his bill, I might be able to draw some conclusions from it, but I'm not able to because it's not permitted.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, think about it logically. You don't have to look at his bill to explain to me how that can be any different. I mean, you just knocked my house because I got electric furnace, but yet he's using an outside
wood burner and his bill went up $100.
Yep.
There may be some ancillary reason for that, and I don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes folks who have outside wood burners don't stoke them up, and so in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, their electric furnace kicks in. I can't.
I grew up with an outside wood burner. I know anybody that's got one knows you go out and load it up before you go to bed at night, so it runs all night.
Well, then, in addition to that, they also run on electricity. There's also a fan motor that blows. There's a pump that pumps the water throughout.
I understand all that. Yeah.
Well, that's why it wouldn't go up, $300. It would only go up an appreciable amount. The rate increase has a lot to do with it, sir, and with the dollar figure. The rate is increased, a penny and a half. So it's gone up from 8.5 cents to about 10 cents. In addition to that, there's what's called the gap recovery. So your bill is for 32 days instead of 30 days. That also has an impact on it.
Okay, so what does a say 150 kilowatt for 300 kilowatt for 2 days? What would that cost me?
300 kilowatt hours for 2 days?
Yeah.
600 kilowatt hours?
Yeah, no. Just I'm averaging about 150 right now, I think, per day. So that's
150 kilowatt hours a day.
Yeah, so for 2 days, that's 300 kilowatt hours, right?
It'd be 10 cents per. So 300, take a zero off. You're talking about $30.
$30. Okay, so there's $30 added on my bill every month for that whatever you called it, that extra billing cycle.
No, it isn't added on to your bill. It is usage that you've consumed that we're billing you for. So it's not. We just don't arbitrarily add some factor on. It's now if for some reason on one of those days, you didn't use much electricity, then there wouldn't be much added on. But if you used a bunch that day, then that bunch would be added on. So it isn't some arbitrary factor that we're putting on there. It's instead of billing you from the, say, for instance, okay, when I look at your bill is from November the 15th to December the 17th. So instead of it being from November the 15th to December the 15th, it's 2 extra days.
And why is that?
So it is to make the bill come out when it's used. So there is a gap in between the time the bill comes out and when the meter's read. And the reason that was in there was before the meter cards. You remember? You have to remember that because it was not too long ago. The meter cards would go out. Folks would write the usage on, and so there was a gap in there, a billing gap, and that gap is being reduced to when you used it, the reading will be obtained and the bill will go out right then. So instead of it going out in some future date, and partially that is being done to combat the situation that we're dealing with now, because a lot of folks they remember January as being warm. It's like, well, you're saying my bill was high, but yet it was very warm. Well, in fact, it was warm in the end of January, but the 1st of January, it wasn't. It was quite cold. In fact, it was 10 degrees for the first, period of time. So it will push the billing closer to the time it was used. Because, and this isn't something new that we've dealt with. It happens every year when you have periods of mild weather and periods of harsh weather. It's just human nature to remember that it wasn't, cold because the last part of the month was rather warm. But like I mentioned, your bill, for example, is from the 12th. Your high bill, the one that you're concerned with, is from the 12th, the 17th of December. So it's 12/17 to 1/18. So you have in your bill cold parts of December and cold parts of January. So you've got this segment in there where it's cold. There was like 3 really bad cold spells, 2 or 3 of them in December, and you caught 2 of those, and you caught 1 of them in January. But the balance of the on Christmas Day, it was like 50 something degrees. It was warm.
Mm-hmm.
But, on either side of that, it was really cold. It was down below freezing. And in fact, on the 9th of January or something like that, it was 10 degrees.
So if we have a cold snap like the blizzard of 77, when nobody can get out of their house for all the snow, you're telling me that we're going to be hammered again if we have a whole month of cold days like that. And it's going to be 10 times as worse as it is right now. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm having a tough time, really. If you use a lot of electricity, then there's going to be a high bill, yes.
Well, I appreciate your company, man, and you're trying to do the spin controls, but I'm not buying it. So I appreciate.
But it's not really a spin control, because a spin control implies that I'm trying to tell you something that isn't true, and that's simply not the case. I wouldn't do that. And then I would have to ask you, what would be my advantage? We're a not-for-profit company. All of the money, and having said that, we still make a profit. Okay. At the end of every year, there's a certain amount of money that's and it's not really called profit; it's called margin. But you call it one thing or call it another. It's still extra money over and above what we paid for the electricity. So we buy the electricity and then we charge you extra for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So at the end of the year, there's money left over. That money is allocated to you. It's allocated to your account. And so periodically, the board of directors says, Mr. Watkins, needs his money back from 2014 or whatever year, and that's up to the board of directors that you vote for, that watch over the company, on your behalf. So we have to have those margins because the loan company that loans us the money demands it. And so the rate that we charge you is actually looked over by the Public Service Commission. So the Public Service Commission actually sets that rate. In effect, we don't just arbitrarily say, oh, well, we're going to charge Watkins, twice as much this month. It is something that has to be set, and the rates are established through extensive research. They're not just arbitrarily come up with. And so those rates are established to provide that margin that the banks demand. Okay, and the reason that's done that way is to make up for differences in weather and things like that, so that there's still operating expense, and the bank wants to get paid. Okay, that they want their money, and so that's why there's that margin. But at the end of the year, when we've paid the bank and we've paid, for all the diesel fuel and all the electricity and all the things that have to be paid for to run a business, there's money left over, and that's put in your account. And you get a statement periodically saying what you've got in your account. Now, unlike your regular bank account, when you can just go and just withdraw it when you want, it's only withdrawn when the board of directors said so. But they do say so on a regular basis. And so in June, you'll get a credit that'll show, you've got so much. So I guess the reason I'm going through this big lengthy, scenario with you is just to demonstrate to you that there's no advantage for us to overcharge folks. None whatsoever.
But there is advantage to having not having to admit that there's something wrong with these meters.
Well, there's no evidence that there's anything wrong with them. All of the information that you've read and that you're seeing is all supposition, and it's baseless assertions that are not credible. And so, it's very difficult when somebody says, oh, well, this is such and such, prove that it isn't. How do we prove that the meters are right other than the fact that we've tested them? They were tested when they were manufactured. We tested them. So they're all, every meter has been tested, basically double, and they're less than 2 years old. So there's no information to indicate that they're wrong. We haven't had one yet that's indicated wrong. It is unfortunate that some people want to get something like this riled up to get folks upset about something that there's absolutely no information on to indicate it. And so then what that does is that makes me have to sit here and and explain this over and over to folks. But it's what my job is. But typically I do other things.
Yeah, but I mean, most of the people here in Henderson County have seen their bills double. There is something
Yes,
wrong
sir.
with it.
That's exactly right. That's an accurate statement. Their bill has doubled, but the rate hasn't doubled. Their consumption has doubled because November was warm and December and the first week of January was extremely cold. And that's an accurate statement. Those are things that are provable. If you wanted to investigate it, and I'm not sure if you do, but if you wanted to, you can go to the National Weather Service and look for historical weather data and look at the degree days for November and look at the degree days for December and January. And what you have to do is you have to look at them by day and not look at the average temperature of the month, because the average temperature of the month doesn't really tell you anything, but the degree days is what determines whether your furnace runs or not. Okay. And so if you look at that, you'll see that the things that I told you were correct. That last December, there was only 500 and some odd degree days. This December, there's over 800. So that's an appreciable increase, almost double, not quite. It'd be from 400 to 800 would be double, and it's from 550 to 840 or 870 or so. Honestly, it escapes me now because I don't have it right in front of me. But that's an appreciable difference between the last year's winter and this year's winter. And then when you look at last month or the month before, which will be November and December, it is over double. It's well over double. So if you have more degree days, and what degree days are, it's just it's a measurement of whether your furnace is running or not, basically. And so when you have more degree days in a month, your furnace is going to run twice as much, and your bill's going to be double. I mean, that's a true statement. And for someone to say my bill doubled, that is accurate. But to say my bill doubled and there's absolutely no reason why it did is not factual. That's not accurate. And, and all it does is makes us seem like we're trying to make excuses when, in fact, there is a reason for it. It was colder weather. It's no more complicated than that.
Okay. Well, I disagree with you, sir, and I hope you have a good day.
I would encourage you to look it up if you feel like it or if you want to, and see whether I'm telling you the truth or not. And then when you determine, that I told you the truth, you might assume that some of the other things I told you were true. I mean, there's no advantage for me to lie to you whatsoever.
Other than you spend all this money on these smart meters that's caused everybody's bill to double, and you're into it now where you have to keep up the facade that there's nothing wrong with the meters. That's horseshit, and I don't agree with it, but I do appreciate you talking to me. Have a good day.
You too, sir.